Teddy and Drew is fucking awesome over there. If you're a Broncos fan, you got to be very excited. You were potentially going to have Deshaun Watson at one point. You're going to have Russell Wilson at one point. You're going to have Aaron Rodgers at one point. And now you have Teddy and Drew playing their best football. That has to feel pretty good if you're a Broncos fan.
Well, and that's what I almost feel.
Even though preseason.
Right. Yeah. But that's why I almost feel bad for Teddy is if they're both as good as they've been so far, like you have to start Drew Lock, right? It's like this guy's been here, he knows the offense. Like these guys are both balling out. Like,
and general manager George Payton has already come out and said
vote of confidence for him
for John Elway's draft pick. I don't want to just quit on this guy because we drafted him or whatever. So Teddy would have to beat him outright, I think. But they're both playing well. Who knows how the season's going to go? 17 games is a long time, man. Long time.
Well, and that's why the whole conversation is week 1. But you said it before the show. It's like, well, who's going to start week 3? Like, that's where it really matters because week 1, week 2, if you come out and you're slow, they're going to go to the other guy, and then all of a sudden that guy can take over because of the fact that he lost the job for week 1, and now he's even more motivated, to your point from earlier.
Here's a fun little exercise everybody can do at home is try to predict the starting quarterbacks for all the competitions that we all know are out there. There's a lot of them. This seems to be more than there has been in some time. And I think that goes to General George Payton's quote that there's more quarterbacks now than there are lockdown corners, which is how he protected his draft pick of Surtain or whatever. But go ahead and go. Who's going to be the starter week 4? Okay, and I think that is a good, like, for instance, in Chicago, Andy Dalton's the starter. Andy Dalton is the starter. Justin Fields came out and said, we just got to trust that the plan and everything's good. But he actually said, I hope they cheer for Andy Dalton. It's kind of disrespectful, that whole thing. Andy Dalton goes out there and does not play well. Okay, whether it's Nagy's fault, Andy's fault, Chicago's fault, who cares? Him and Pace know that they're on a shot clock up there.
Yeah.
Justin Fields is going in week 2, week 3 maybe if that thing doesn't go, or maybe second half, first game if it doesn't. Yeah. Everybody has a plan right until you get punched in the face. Mike Tyson said that getting punched in the face in the NFL is like, oh, this shit ain't going how we thought it was going to go. Mostly because how we thought it was going to go is Andy Dalton might come out and ball.
Yeah.
Legit. But whenever you start thinking like who's going to be the starter in week 4, I think that's a much more interesting conversation. Jimmy and Trey, what's going on out there? I mean, there is a lot of interesting conversations around the NFL that I think that is a much cooler convo as opposed to week 1 because that's being kind of projected.
Yeah, and you wonder how long all these guys' leashes are. Like, to your point, who knows if after the first half of the first game they're like, all right, fuck it, let's just go with the backup because, we got to give him a shot.
Yeah, like Cam. What if Cam comes out after these 5 days off and then he struggles as well? They're going to be calling for Mac. How long is that going to have? Like, even if he has a great first game.
Yeah.
If he has a bad second game, bad third game, week 4, they're going to be calling for Mac heavy, Like, I think that is the fascinating part of this whole thing because if you win the mob, you win Rome, they say, but you have to make a lot of decisions that go against your fan base. Challenges, we've seen this. There's been vocal. I mean, it's not a great time to be a head coach who has to decide between the future of your franchise and the right now of your franchise while realizing you could get fucking fired. Andy Dalton's still the starter in Chicago. Justin Fields is playing great football. Justin Fields came out and said he wishes the fans would be a little bit more respectful to Andy Dalton, a Red Rifle. I agree, by the way. The guy's out there making plays for your team. Fields mania is happening. Obviously, they traded future picks for him. How's that going to play out? And Nagy, right, and Pace, they're going to get fired if they stink this year, right? So is that going to change anything, you think? Or are they pretty comfortable in their positions and they're dead set on what they're going to do? And why is Andy Dalton kind of getting overlooked in this entire thing, Ian?
So I was in Chicago on Wednesday, and I met with Pace and Matt Nagy, right? And so I asked specifically, I'm like, if I'm going to talk about the quarterbacks, like, am I firm and set in saying that Andy Dalton is going to start week 1? And Matt Nagy said yes. Andy Dalton will start week 1, which is sort of what we knew, honestly. It's not like news or anything. But because Fields has impressed and because there's games and we see these backup quarterbacks go out and play so well against lower competition, yes, but still play so well, it's unfortunately a question that has to keep being asked. I mean, we do the same thing in San Francisco. I think it's safe to say Trey Lance had a pretty up-and-down performance the other night, but we're still asking the question, is Jimmy G the starter? So in Chicago, Dalton's going to start. Fields has been awesome. Like, everything they hoped. Talent-wise, he's really smart. He cares about it. He's got sort of the swag that I think they like. In other words, like a quarterback that people follow and like. It also seems like we sort of thought Andy Dalton was like a real pro, but it seems like he absolutely has been in helping Fields and not being a jerk in a way that some veterans could be. So it seems Dalton's going to start until he doesn't. right? Like he's going to start until at some point it becomes clear to absolutely everyone that he's not the best quarterback on the team anymore. And at that point, it'll be Fields' team, and then here we go.
What about Trey Lance out in San Fran? I know you mentioned them. I watched some of him last night. Man, he threw a nice little bullet across the middle for a touchdown right as I turned it on, I remember.
Hey, AJ, he's big, isn't he?
I know. He's impressive. Like, what's the situation like out there?
Yeah, it seems more like, again, Fields is not going to start in Chicago, but it seems talent-wise, readiness-wise, he would have a shot. It feels like Trey Lance, just from me watching, from talking to people I've talked to, is a little bit further away. The talent is, the talent's what it is. I mean, that throw to Travis Benjamin, I was like, whew. Like I was watching, that was impressive. There's been other parts of the game where managing it, doing the right thing, looking at the right read, it hasn't all been there, which is really fine. I mean, this is a guy who literally played one game last year and came from a lower program. Like, no one expected him to be able to come this year. So, I mean, I think they would like this to be Patrick Mahomes, where he literally sits the whole year. Garoppolo plays fine for a team that otherwise is a playoff-ready roster. And then you make the transition after the season. The only thing I would say is Garoppolo has been injured somewhat frequently in his career. At what point does he crack the door open and let Trey Lance kind of take over? That's what's going to be, I think, really fascinating about the 49ers season.
Let's go ahead and continue on the rap sheet playing around training camp quarterback conversations. Dak Prescott, Jerry Jones said, hey, if we had Tampa tonight, he'd be fucking playing, all right? Get out of here. So he's all good? The shoulder or the lat, whatever the hell it was, is all good? He's just got a little soreness? They feel very comfortable with where he's at? And what are some other storylines we should look for Hard Knocks tomorrow night? Anything?
You're in the right area, by the way. Good research, because that actually is where you heard him. Yeah, basically right there. Like it's not a football injury. It's like a baseball injury, right? But anyway, he's going to be fine. The tests were fine. I know everybody freaked out about him taking an MRI. It sounded like it was more like, let's just make sure this is okay compared to anything else. He is going to be good, 100%. I believe, as my esteemed colleague Tom Pelissero reported on, I don't know when it was, at some point this weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember, Dak is on track for week 1. So he's not going to play in the preseason. We won't have seen him on his ankle. I don't sense any reason to worry at all. But I do know this. The fact that he was actually honest, and the fact that they were like you'll see on Hard Knocks, he is not thrilled about not practicing a lot. Like, it's sort of presented in kind of like a jokey way, but like he's not happy about missing reps, right? That's just the way it is. But them holding him back is probably going to benefit him in the long run. And it's interesting about nice catch. It's interesting about him and his ankle. Like, he was throwing like 60 passes to teammates in April. Like, he's fine and going to be ready.
As a former general manager in the NFL, okay, at a place that needed to draft quarterbacks high on a regular basis, whenever you have the future of the franchise sitting in your building and you have a veteran quarterback playing, let's say like Andy Dalton, Jimmy G, I mean, you can go around all these situations this year. It feels like there's more than this year than there has been in some time. How do you know when to balance, when to pull the trigger? Because Nagy and Pace, they have a plan, and I'm not saying that Justin Fields is necessarily outplaying Andy Dalton. I'm just saying the Niners, they have a plan. Everybody has a plan, but how realistic is that if the plan doesn't go to schedule? You know what I mean? Like, how realistic is that really?
Well, I think this, it's never A or B. Do we start Justin Fields or do we start Andy Dalton? I think you have to imply something we talk about in leadership, which is called second-order thinking. So when a lot of these decisions are really problematic for Kyle Shanahan, for Bill Belichick, for Matt Nagy, is if I start, let's say I start Mac Jones, and let's say Mac Jones doesn't play well the first 2 weeks, and the game's not perfect for him, and he gets into a little bit of a funk. How do I get him out of it? What do I do? Right? If I start Trey Lance and we lose 2 games and he throws picks, what do I do? Whereas if I start Jimmy G and I let this kid kind of develop as he goes along, and then when the time is right, I put him in, guaranteeing he's going to have some success, then that's what I should do. We as fans, we want to rush this thing along. And I think as coaches, you have to have second-order thinking. You've got to say, okay, if I start Fields, then I know Andy Dalton's really not going to be part of the team this year. I'm going to go all in on Fields no matter how bad he plays. I'm not changing quarterbacks. If I start Dalton, there's going to be a time where I'm going to have to put Fields in the game. So you're kind of looking at, it's a little bit like you've got the cue ball, and you know you're going to put one in the pocket. You've got to line the cue ball back to hit the second shot.
Oh. Got to put a little spin on that little English. You got to play for the next shot. You know what I mean? What, Black Widow, right?
Oh, yeah.
She was on ESPN. Oh, she was unbelievable. She was
all of it, guys, is situational based. Like, I watched Trey Lance last night, and you got a Super Bowl contending team in San Francisco, right? Are you going to let him go out there and hold the ball and get sacked and maybe mess up your Super Bowl chance in September when you could allow him to grow and eventually he'll become a good player, right? And so, like, let's keep trying to win games with Jimmy, who took us to a Super Bowl 2 years ago. We had a 10-point lead going in the fourth quarter. Why not wait? Why not let Lance develop and get really comfortable? Because right now they're thinking way too much. Jamar Chase thinking way too much. He's not thinking about catching the ball. He's thinking about running the right route, and he's dropping too many passes. This is what happens.
Mike, with the quarterbacks, though, if you look at, like, let's say Chicago right now, Justin Fields coming out and saying, like, I don't think it's right when they chant my name or if they boo Andy or whatever. How well does Andy Dalton have to play to not have Justin Fields come in and replace him? Because I feel like the first 3 and out, if they're in Chicago, they're going to be going crazy.
And how much does the crowd weigh into that type of shit? Because you have to think about them at some point, right?
I think it also is the guys in the locker room, too. Because, AJ, you and Pat, you both have been in a locker room. You know, now you were in situations where you had star quarterbacks, so nobody was going to challenge them. But the reality of this, the team knows, too. The team has more confidence. You know, the team knows, hey, if we have Fields in the game, we're going to play better. Or if we have Dalton in the game, you know, he'll help us out. I think it's a real challenge. And to me, it's really for Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, where is our team going this year? I don't think they're a Super Bowl contending team. I don't think they'll win 7 or 8 games. I would start Fields and just start his process moving along and build a team around that. If I'm in San Francisco where I'm competing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, I'm going to start Garoppolo and let Lance develop. So I think it's all situational based. And I think that's really, you got to know who your team is before you make that move.